I was not super motivated for this German Nationals, I will say. I'm not the biggest fan of Snake Eye format, so I started very late. I didn't join Team Raid and Trade, I just tested with a bunch of them or talked to them a couple days before the event. They shared some of their theories with me, and they got me hooked on Snake Eyes. Or like, not hooked, but they convinced me that Snake Eye was the only thing worth playing, right? And so the last week before the event, I spent just like theorizing Snake Eye lists and all that kind of stuff with them. And then last minute, on the Friday, I switched off. I played Melodious because I just couldn't bring myself to play Snake Eyes, but I still wanted to give them a shout out because I appreciate that they let me join their testing circle, even though I didn't end up playing the same deck. And then I want to give a shout out to Skrelp and to Herman, who I then talked to on the Friday, because obviously Herman won Swedish Nationals with Melodious, and Skrelp also played it at the UK Nationals, so that's where I got some input from on the Friday, and that was obviously really helpful. And I also want to give a special shout out to new sponsor of the channel, Holon, who gave me a bunch of OCG sleeves that I was able to give out to the people. That was really fun. You guys make sure to check out Holon. I got top 32 with this deck, but I will say I don't think I did this deck justice. I think this deck was really good. I unfortunately wasn't as good with the deck as I would have liked to be. I misplayed more than I am used to, even though at the end I didn't really get punished for it very often. The reason why I wanted to play the deck was because the Melodious deck has really strong combos that end up making some really cool mid-rangey boards where you set up like Etoile, Schuberta to banish cards out of your opponent's graveyard, obviously the Aria to protect your stuff from targeting in battle, and you can pair this engine up with a lot of hand traps, right? So let's just go through the deck and I'll tell you the individual reasons why I thought this deck had a good shot at defeating Snake Eyes. It's always 3 Refrain and 3 Couplet. I decided to play 3 Sopranos. The biggest reason is I played Desires, and I think if you only play 2 and banish 1, it can be really awkward. The deck can play with 1 Soprano, but it's just a lot easier if you have 2. The biggest reason why I went up with Soprano is because I wanted to play a higher Melodious count in general, just by 1, but that was because I wanted to have the maximum chance of having Orange Light life, and I also wanted to have high Melodious count hands, simply because the number of 1-card starters for this deck, you simply can't play more, right? If you could, you would, but like Refrain, First Movement Solo, and Ostinato are the only 1-card combos available. If you want to increase the consistency of the deck, the only tools available are Pots, which I played, and just playing more Melodious cards to increase the chances of seeing 2-card combos, right? Because Couplet plus any Melodious, for example, is a 2-card combo that plays the game at least, right? I also played 3 Sonata. I did not play Canon. I think Sonata is just better. And then it's 1 Aria and 1 Chopina, right? So that's the Melodious monsters, which comes out to 14. And then obviously you have 3 First Movement Solo and 3 Ostinatos, and I decided to play 2 Concerto. I only brought 1 with me to the event, and on Friday I decided to play a second one, so I had to pull it out of my entry packs, and I did. 2 Concertos has more reasons than just the fact that I'm playing Desires, which I am playing 3 Desires. I played 2 because of Desires, but also because Ghost Ogre was getting relatively popular, and when Couplet gets Ghost Ogred, it's really good to have a hard-drawn Concerto. In the Melodious mirror match, it's really annoying if your opponent's Schuberta banishes your Concerto, and that mattered a lot that I had a second one in that matchup. I decided to play Desires simply because the mentality or the idea behind this deck is you play a lot of hand traps and you play a lot of very efficient 1 to 2 card combos. You just want to have card advantage. I have lost games because I banished important resources. That stuff happens. It doesn't feel good playing with this card, but I think it was too powerful to not play it, because when you're back and forth hand trapping with your opponent, which is just unfortunately a lot of what this format is, it's really important to get those extra cards into your hand, right? To be able to afford those trades. Desires just offers that, right? The rest of this deck is just Ash, Mourner, Veiler, and Imperm. Those were the 12 like generically good hand traps that I preferred for the format, because they have the highest chance, I think, to stop Snake Eyes if you draw them in combinations of multiples. And then one of the big reasons why I like this deck is Herald of the Orange Light, a very key piece to the puzzle, I think, because it's a very good addition to the hand trap lineup. Obviously one of the best hand traps out there. In combination, Herald plus another hand trap usually is enough to end a turn, and this deck can even recover it from the graveyard. So once you get into the loop of heralding your opponent, you can usually add it back with this and then use it again. And it's also the only hand trap that lets you negate other hand traps if you really want to. If you get ashed on your ostinato, you can orange light that ash and resolve your ostinato. It's really cool. And then add the herald back later. So it's kind of like a pseudo called by the grave as well. And this is another reason why I also wanted to play more copies of some of these fairies that you usually only play in 2ofs, because I wanted to be able to discard something off of herald that I didn't need in my hand. If the only fairy in my hand is a refrain, I don't want to discard that because that's a really good starter card, right? So I wanted to go higher on quote unquote like disposable melodious cards that you can discard off of Herald of the Orange Light. In hindsight, I even would have liked to draw more melodious cards. Like in some games I drew too much non-engine and I would have preferred having even more melodiouses, so maybe you can fit the canon somehow. And this is 40. It feels very clean. Honestly, I don't know if I would change much. I would try to fit more melodious monsters if I could. Talents would have been nice to draw cards after you get hand trapped. I decided to not fit those in the main deck because I wanted to play the second concerto and the third soprano. I sacrificed some non-engine spots for that. I don't really have any complaints about the main deck. I think most of the complaints that I had were related to my own play rather than the deck. The extra deck is relatively trivial, to be honest, because a lot of these things just don't come up. You need the fusions, 3 Baja, 2 Schuberta, 2 Etoile. I played Bloom Diva. I summoned it once and won a game with it. You need the Link Monster as well. The Link Monster is pretty good, even though you try to not rely on it because it's a really, really easy to interrupt choke point. This is usually what you go into after you get hand trapped once or twice, or you've already figured out that they don't have a hand trap, then you can go into this guy. Gravity Controller to link off your Baja after you get impermed on it sometimes matters. This thing is mainly here to out skill drain. SP is like a good generic card whenever you're not locked. Made this a bunch. Haggard Lizardos. I never made this, but I think it's necessary to clear your board to enable Ostinato again. I played Goddess because Herman told me to play Goddess. I think I made Goddess once and I still lost that game. Oh, and Typhon. Typhon definitely comes up. So this comes up, this comes up, this comes up. Most important part is the fusions. In like 90% of games, I feel like you mostly go into the fusions. Typhon and SP can come up on follow-up turns a lot. I wanted to play Lina. I decided not to. And Lina would have actually been good in my Melodious mirrors a lot of the time. And then the side deck, I decided to just lean into the strength of the deck and side more hand traps for the matchups where you might maybe need some more specific ones. I was a little scared of Tenpai. I played 3 Ogres. These are also really good in the mirror and they cover a bunch of rogue decks. I don't actually like Ghost Ogre in this deck versus Snake Eye because it doesn't really pair well with the effect negation. Like Ghost Ogre against Snake Eye, it's really more of a board breaker. You can Ghost Ogre their IP or their Appaloosa, but that means you let them play, right? And that was not my plan. My plan was to stop them from playing. That's why I didn't main deck Ogre, but it is really good in a lot of rogue matchups, or not even rogue, but like the mirror match, Tenpai, all that kind of stuff. Like the card has a lot of solid applications. Random stuff like Pearly, which can always happen. I played against Centurion, where the card is also pretty strong. So those kind of things. And then I played a card. I don't really like this in this deck and against a lot of decks in the format, but I decided to play it anyways for one specific reason. I played Droll Lockbirds, which I typically don't think go very well with decks that play a lot of hand traps, right? Like I don't like playing Droll when I'm already like trying to imperm or ash or whatever my opponent, because then what am I really preventing, right? Like it's really awkward. For example, if your opponent normal summons a Snake Eye Ash and you have like imperm and Droll in hand, like are you gonna let them search or are you gonna imperm the Snake Eye Ash, right? It puts you in awkward situations. But my problem with this deck was that people have been playing the Kashtira version of Snake Eyes a lot more, right? If you paid attention to like Italian nationals and all that kind of stuff, there were like people playing Terraforming, Planet, Prosperity with the Kashtira cards, which makes the deck a lot better into the other hand traps that I was playing, right? The normal like Imperm, Ash, Veiler approach gets a lot worse if they start with like Planet and Prosperity or whatever, because they have a much higher chance of playing through those cards. What they don't play through anymore is Droll and Lockbird. And so if I saw that my opponent was like on a really board breaker heavy Kashtira card Snake Eye list, I would take the Drolls into my deck. If they were just a normal hand trap Snake Eye, I didn't cite the Droll and Lockbird. So this was mainly for the Kashtira Snake Eye decks, but also just in case you run into something, because it's nationals, you don't know, it could be anything, right? If you ever run into something crazy, you can also put in Droll and Lockbird, right? So like, for example, top 64, I played against Flu, threw in Droll and Lockbird, and they Prosperity'd for Eaglin and I Drolled. I played 2 DD Crows. Basically, I thought my main deck was already quite fine against Snake Eyes. I actually didn't side much for Snake Eye unless they were playing the Kashtira cards. I just focused on some of the matchups that I didn't have as much for, and Crow was solid in a lot of those. I played 1 Tam Tam. Then there's 3 Cosmics because I was a little scared of Runic Stun, which I played against 1, but it also is good against Tenpai. 1 Duster, same reason. Called by the Grave and Rivalry are here to basically amplify for going first. Both of these cards are main deckable. Honestly, the deck itself was quite fine. I liked it. I wasn't as well prepared as I would have liked. I think I could have done better. Just to give you guys a brief recap, I went 9-3 in Swiss. I got 64th after Swiss when we played top 64, so that was really lucky. And then I won top 64 against Flu and lost top 32 to Tenpai. I made a small mistake game 1 that ended up costing me game 1. Overall, I'm happy with the result. Looking at how much work I've put into it, I'm not happy with my performance because I'm not used to playing a deck with so little practice at a big event and then making mistakes like that. And I'm hoping I can get more practice in. I just noticed that recently with like the low amount of EU events and with how much Master Duel I play and other stuff is going on, like the TCG has been taking a smaller and smaller portion in my life, and I kind of want to change that. And I really noticed that at German Nationals. I'm not used to losing this many games because I make mistakes. Overall though, German Nationals was a really fun time. I want to give a shout out to everyone who came up and said hi. That's my Nationals top 32 Melodious deck list. If you're looking into playing Melodious, I hope it gives you some insight on which kind of decks can perform in this format that aren't Snake Eyes, because there are still some or plenty decks out there that can top events, obviously, even though I did get a little bit lucky with getting 64th after Swiss. I learned a lot from this weekend, specifically about how I need to improve at preparing for these events in the future. I'm hoping I can do better at Euros. I hope you enjoyed the deck profile. If you did and you watched this on YouTube, make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below. I would really appreciate that. We're gonna go back to recapping Nationals on stream now, so say goodbye to YouTube chat